Direct News TV. August 28, 2023. Russia-Ukraine updates. Russia says intercepted 2 U.S. drones near Crimea. Russian, Turkish foreign ministers to meet in Moscow soon. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan will hold talks in Moscow in the nearest future, the state TASS news agency has reported, citing Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. Turkey is trying to persuade Russia to return to a deal that allows for the export of grain via Ukraine's Black Sea ports. The Kremlin has said President Vladimir Putin is likely to hold talks in person soon with Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on the Black Sea Grain Accord and other issues, but no date or venue has yet been announced. Russia scrambles 2 jets to counter U.S. drones near Crimea, ministry. Russia has scrambled 2 fighter jets to ward off 2 U.S. drones flying over the Black Sea near Russia-annexed Crimea, the Russian Ministry of Defense said. It said the drones were conducting intelligence but left the area once the fighter jets were deployed. Ukraine adamantly against any grain import restrictions after September 15. Ukraine is adamantly against any grain import restrictions being imposed by neighboring countries after European Union restrictions end on September 15, Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has said during a visit to the Czech capital Prague. Ukraine says it liberated strategic southeastern settlement. Ukraine says its troops have liberated the southeastern settlement of Robotyne and are trying to push further south in their counteroffensive against Russian forces. Ukraine's military says it has broken through the most difficult line of Russian defenses in the south and will now start advancing more quickly, a commander who led troops into Robotyne told Reuters last week. Robotyne has been liberated, Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar was quoted as saying by the military. The settlement is 10 kilometers 6 miles south of the frontline town of Orikhiv in the Zaporizhia region. It is on an important road leading to Tokmak, a Russian-occupied road and rail hub. Putin to miss G20 summit in New Delhi, India. Putin will skip the Group of 20, G20, summit in India next month and will send his foreign minister instead, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's office has said. Modi's office said he spoke with Putin by telephone, expressing an understanding for his decision not to attend the summit. Prime Minister Modi thanked President Putin for Russia's consistent support to all initiatives under India's G20 presidency, the Indian government said. India has not condemned Russia for its invasion of Ukraine and has increased its purchases of Russian oil during the 18-month war. Ukraine's offensive in Zaporizhia region increases nuclear risk, IAEA. The head of the world's nuclear watchdog says Ukraine's offensive in the Zaporizhia region has increased the risk to Europe's largest nuclear power plant, Russia's TASS news agency reports. As you know, there is a counteroffensive going on now, which has been concentrated in the Zaporizhia region in recent days. I'm talking about the region, not the station itself. This, of course, increases the likelihood of an attack on the station or damage to it, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, said at a Swedish Institute of International Affairs event. Grossi said any accident at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant would affect neighboring countries and Europe as a whole. Putin, Modi discussed ties in phone call, Kremlin. Putin and Modi have discussed ties, including trade, energy and space cooperation, during a phone call, the Kremlin says. The two leaders also discussed the planned expansion of the BRICS group of emerging economies, comprising India, Russia, China, Brazil and South Africa, as well as the G20 summit, which New Delhi will host next month. Topical issues of Russian-Indian relations, which are progressively developing in the spirit of a particularly privileged strategic partnership, were considered, in the call, the Kremlin said in a statement. The positive dynamics of trade and economic cooperation was affirmed, it added. EU should get ready to admit new members by 2030, bloc chief says. European Council President Charles Michel says the EU should get ready to admit new members from Eastern Europe and the Balkans by 2030. While addressing the Bled Strategic Forum in Slovenia, Michel said, "To be credible, I believe we must talk about timing and homework. As we prepare the EU's next strategic agenda, we must set ourselves a clear goal. I believe we must be ready, on both sides, by 2030, to enlarge. This is ambitious but necessary. It shows that we are serious. With fighting still raging in Ukraine and Moldova's pro-Western government trying to reform, senior officials have previously been reluctant to offer a precise timetable for those countries joining the bloc. Erdogan to visit Russia soon, party spokesperson says. Turkey's Erdogan will visit Russia's Black Sea resort of Sochi soon and there may be developments regarding the Black Sea grain export deal, a spokesperson for Erdogan's ruling AK party says. Moscow quit the UN and Turkey brokered agreement in July after complaining that limitations to its grain exports had not been lifted. Ankara has been trying to persuade Russia to return to the agreement, under which Ukraine's 3 seaports had shipped tens of millions of tons of grain after Russia launched its full-scale invasion. The AK party spokesperson, Omer Selik, did not specify whether Erdogan would meet with Putin, but on Friday, the Kremlin said there is an understanding the two will meet in person soon. Finland to spend 2.3% of GDP on defense in 2024. Finland plans to spend 2.3% of its gross domestic product, GDP, on defense next year, its Ministry of Defense says. NATO's newest member plans to spend a bit more than the minimum NATO members have agreed to allocate for their militaries, 2% of their GDPs. Finland said it plans to spend €6 billion, $6.48 billion, on defense in 2024, which is about €116 million, $125 million, less than the estimate for 2023. Finland's defense spending has increased significantly in recent years, even before it became a NATO member, due to it replacing its fleet of F-18 combat jets with F-35 fighter jets. In April, Finland joined the alliance in a historic security policy U-turn in response to neighboring Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Finland is also spending on military aid to Ukraine. The total value of its military equipment donations reached €1.3 billion, $1.4 billion, last week. Second cargo ship from Ukraine arrives in Istanbul since Russia quit grain deal. A second cargo ship to leave Ukraine since Russia withdrew from the Black Sea grain export deal has reached Istanbul, marine traffic monitors say. Since Russia pulled out of the deal last month, it has attacked Ukrainian port infrastructure and warned that it may consider any ships in the Black Sea as military targets. Ukraine is now trying to establish a new route its ships can use without Russia's involvement in time for the autumn harvest. Its humanitarian corridor hugs the Black Sea coast of Romania and Bulgaria. Meanwhile, Turkey has been trying to revive the original agreement, hoping to use it for broader peace talks between Kiev and Moscow. Lithuania could close 2 border points with Belarus. Lithuania's Interior Ministry will propose closing 2 of the country's 4 remaining border crossings with Belarus, the Baltic News Service, BNS, reported, quoting Lithuanian Interior Minister Aini Bilotaite. On August 16, the Lithuanian government announced the closure of 2 other crossing points, cutting the number from 6 to 4, blaming geopolitical circumstances weeks after Russian Wagner mercenaries took refuge in Belarus. Neighboring Poland has closed all but 1 border crossing point with Belarus. Ukrainian, Czech foreign ministers discussed defense cooperation. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba met his Czech counterpart to discuss developing defense cooperation. On X, the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, Kuleba wrote, "I also invited the Czech government and companies to Ukraine's first Defense Industries Forum this fall." Poland, Baltic states threaten closure of border with Belarus due to Wagner mercenaries. Polish Interior Minister Mariusz Kaminski says Warsaw and the Baltic states will close their borders with Belarus entirely if a critical incident involving Wagner mercenaries takes place. EU members Latvia, Lithuania and Poland, which share a border with Belarus, have been increasingly concerned about security since hundreds of Russian Wagner mercenaries arrived in Belarus at the invitation of President Alexander Lukashenko. We demand from the authorities in Minsk that the Wagner Group immediately leave the territory of Belarus and that illegal migrants immediately leave the border area and are sent back to their home countries, Kaminsky told a news conference. If there is a critical incident, regardless of whether it is at the Polish or Lithuanian border, we will retaliate immediately. All border crossings that have been opened so far will be closed, he said. Kremlin dismisses Kyiv's humanitarian corridor. The Kremlin has dismissed the prospect of renewing the Black Sea grain deal as a second Ukrainian ship passes through a temporary corridor. The prospects for the renewal of the grain deal depend on the actual implementation, not just in words, of the promises, the pledges given to the Russian side, which means implementing the part of the deal pertaining to Russia, spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.